Elias Crow is a firefighter who saves lives for a living, until the system fails to save the one life that matters most. With his sister dying and time running out, he discovers a cache of stolen goods buried beneath a burning warehouse. What begins as a desperate theft to fund her treatment spirals into a war with the criminal underworld, a cover-up, and a final act of arson that will either destroy him or redeem him. In a world where doing the right thing isn't enough, how far will one man go to save the person he loves most? Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sirens had long faded, but Elias Crow still heard them. Not the high-pitched whine of fire engines racing down narrow streets, but the echo of something deeper, like a slow scream held beneath his ribs. The weight of the uniform on his shoulders, the helmet in his lap, the thick calluses on his hands. These were all easy burdens. They came with fire, with heat, with the rhythmic certainty of danger. But this other weight, this one didn't burn. It hollowed. He sat alone on the cracked leather couch in his apartment, dim light from a table lamp throwing soft shadows on the peeling walls. A framed photo of Mia, his little sister, smiled at him from the end table, age 10, missing a tooth, hugging the golden retriever they used to have. She was 25 now, and lying 2 rooms away, barely strong enough to speak. Outside, the city coughed itself into another restless night. Elias heard the distant rumble of a train, a dog barking somewhere. He didn't look up when her voice came, thin and papery. "Did you eat?" It sounded like breath more than sound. He pushed up from the couch, grabbed the 4 bag to check the flow, and forced a smile into his voice. "I will. You need anything?" She shook her head, slow and slight. Her hair, what was left of it, was tucked beneath a soft beanie. Her eyes, though dulled by pain, still held that stubborn fire. She used to spar with him, back when her body worked. Taekwondo classes. Bruised ribs. Laughing as he limped off the mat. He missed that. The clock ticked past midnight. Insurance had denied them again this morning. Experimental treatment, too costly. No clinical trials approved in-state. They had exhausted every appeal, every fundraiser. Every friend had already chipped in more than they should have. Elias didn't want charity anyway. He went back to the living room, picked up the crumpled envelope from the coffee table. The words printed on the denial letter didn't change, no matter how long he stared at them. But his thoughts did. They shifted, warped. If fire taught him anything, it was how quickly things turned. A gust of wind, a single ember in the wrong place, and suddenly everything was ash. He pressed the envelope flat, smoothed the creases with scarred fingers. There were lines he'd never thought he'd cross. He built his life on honor, on duty. But honor didn't heal lungs. Duty didn't pay for medicine. And love was supposed to protect. But love without means, that just watched people die. From the hallway, he heard Mia's breathing settle into the fragile rhythm of sleep. Elias leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his jaw clenched so tight it trembled. Somewhere in the distance, another siren rose, brief and fading. He closed his eyes and made a decision that would burn through everything he once believed was right. And he didn't look back. The call came in just past 3 a.m., a warehouse blaze in the old industrial district near the river. Abandoned property. No occupants reported. Elias was already slipping on his gear before the dispatcher finished the address. They rolled out under a silver-slivered moon, the truck's red lights flashing like arterial blood across the wet pavement. Rain had just passed through, leaving steam rising from the gutters. Elias stood on the back step, gloved hands gripping the rail, his breath misting in the night air. "Another empty husk fire," Darren muttered beside him, flipping his helmet strap. "Probably some junkies trying to stay warm." Elias didn't answer. He was watching the skyline for smoke. He didn't care what started it. Fire was fire. But lately, every alarm felt like an echo of something louder he couldn't silence. The warehouse was already coughing smoke by the time they pulled in. A corrugated metal behemoth, paint flaked like dead skin, windows blackened. The scent of old oil and something more chemical stung the air. "Let's move." Captain Harding's voice barked through the comm, "Sweep the interior, quick and tight. Watch your footing." Inside, visibility dropped to 0. Black smoke twisted like ghost limbs through the rafters. Elias moved through the gloom with practiced ease, his axe swinging to clear debris, boots crunching over charred crates and shattered glass. It was hotter than it should have been for a building this empty. He reached the back of the structure, where the heat pulsed thickest. That's when he saw it. Beneath a warped metal hatch, half melted by flame, was a trapdoor leading underground. Elias knelt, pried it open with the edge of his axe. A narrow stairwell dropped into darkness. Against protocol, but something pulled at him. Not instinct. Not curiosity. Something colder. He descended fast. The fire hadn't touched this room. It was sealed off, almost sterile. Metal shelves stacked high with boxes wrapped in plastic and canvas. Electronics. Watches. Designer clothes. Locked crates with foreign shipping labels. None of it belonged here. This wasn't a junky fire. This was a front. And someone had tried to erase it. Elias ripped open one of the crates. Rolexes, pristine, lined like soldiers in foam beds. Another box, tablets, still shrink-wrapped. His breath caught, not at the value, but at the implications. Stolen goods. Organized. Hidden. He looked around. No cameras. No obvious identifiers. For a moment he did nothing, just stood there, helmet in one hand, staring at more money than he'd ever seen in his life. More than enough. Enough to buy every treatment Mia would need. Twice over. He could report it. Of course he could. They'd come in, document, seal the site, investigate. It would become evidence. Buried in bureaucracy. Useless to him. But no one knew this room existed. And it was already burning above. The hatch clanged shut behind him, and Elias looked at his reflection in a wall of glossy black boxes. His face dirty, streaked with soot and sweat, eyes hollow. He whispered it aloud, just to test the weight of it. No one will miss what was already stolen. He stepped back into the smoke and let the thought take root like a spark buried deep in dry wood, waiting to burn. The first time Elias touched the stash again was 3 nights later. He waited until after his shift, after Mia's meds had been administered and she was finally asleep. Curled on the couch, too weak to make it to her bed, her breath shallow but steady. He stood over her for a long time, just watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. One mistreatment, the specialist had warned, and the regression could be permanent. She was slipping through his fingers day by day. The warehouse had been sealed off as expected. The fire report was filed. Cause electrical fault. Accidental. Elias's statement had been brief, clean. No mention of the basement. No mention of the fortune tucked beneath the scorched floorboards. It gnawed at him, the silence. But the guilt hadn't yet calcified. It floated, flickering, like smoke on the edge of his thoughts. He drove back to the warehouse at 2 a.m. The police tape hung limp in the wind, sagging like a tired boundary. Elias ducked under it. His boots echoed in the hollow structure as he slipped into the dark. The hatch was untouched. He descended into the hidden room again. This time he brought tools. He didn't take much, just one small crate, no bigger than a carry-on bag. Inside were watches. Dozens. Their dials glittered in the low light, ticking in perfect unison like synchronized heartbeats. Back home, he contacted someone he never wanted to speak to again, Cal Becker. Ex-fence, ex-con, occasional informant. Elias had arrested him once in a sting operation. But Becker owed him. Deeply. The meeting happened in the back room of an auto garage that reeked of grease and stale cigarettes. "You're shitting me," Cal said, eyeing the contents of the crate. "You sure you want to do this?" Elias said nothing. His face was stone. Cal picked up a watch, turned it over, whistled. "These ain't knockoffs. This is cartel-level merchandise." Elias only said, "How fast can you move them?" Cal eyed him. "You're not stupid. So I won't ask stupid questions. But this right here? This isn't a one-time thing. You sell one, you've already made a deal." Elias stared at the watch in Cal's hand, then at his own reflection in the smudged mirror behind the desk. His jaw was tight, his eyes unfamiliar. "I need cash. Clean. No names." Cal nodded slowly. "You got it. But just know this road doesn't U-turn easy." When Elias got home that night, a thick envelope of cash sat in his glove box. More money than he had seen in one place. Enough to pay for Mia's next round of treatment, and then some. He handed it to the hospital in cash. No questions asked. By morning, Mia's specialist called to say her numbers had stabilized. The treatment was working. Elias stood in the hallway outside her room and wept. Not with relief. Not entirely. With guilt. With fear. Because it had worked. Doing the wrong thing had worked. And now he was in deeper than fire. Elias couldn't sleep anymore. Not because of the nightmares, those he was used to. Fires that never ended, ceilings collapsing, screams behind walls he couldn't break through. No, this was different. This was quieter. He'd lie in bed with his hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling, and feel the pulse of his choices ticking just beneath the surface, like a second heartbeat. The stash was still hidden beneath the warehouse, untouched except for what he'd taken. It hadn't been discovered. Not yet. But Elias knew that sort of secret didn't keep forever. Not in this city. His second drop with Cal had gone smoother. Too smooth. Another crate. Designer handbags this time. He never touched them. Just packed them up, made the exchange, collected cash, and handed it over to the clinic. No paper trail. No loose ends. And still, he couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Then came the note. It was waiting for him on his windshield after shift. A small, folded piece of white paper tucked beneath the wiper blade. No envelope. Just 2 words, handwritten in thick black ink. We're watching. No name. No symbol. Just that. Elias scanned the lot. Empty. Early morning fog curled low across the asphalt. His chest tightened, not from fear, but from the knowledge that he'd just stepped onto a stage he hadn't realized he was part of. The criminals who owned the stash were aware. Someone had noticed. And someone had decided not to go to the police. They decided to wait. To let him sweat. Later that night, Elias sat in the firehouse kitchen, hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee, trying to act normal. But Darren, his partner, his closest friend, was watching him with the sharpness of someone who had seen too many people fall apart after too many fires. You've been off lately, Darren said, voice low. Not just tired. Distracted. Jumpy. Elias forced a shrug. Mia's treatments are getting more intense. I'm just stretched thin. Darren nodded, but didn't drop it. Your last report on the warehouse fire had gaps. And the captain mentioned your radio was dead for 10 minutes that night. Elias looked up sharply. My mic was glitching. You know how the gear gets. You sure about that? Darren asked, eyes steady. Because when you came out of that building, you were different. And not the just pulled a kid out of a fire different. You were somewhere else. Elias held his gaze. What are you saying? I'm saying if you're in trouble, real trouble, I should know. I've got your back. But if you're hiding something that puts the team at risk, I can't ignore it. Elias opened his mouth, then closed it again. He wanted to tell him. God, he wanted to tell him. Everything. That he was doing it for Mia. That he hadn't meant for it to spiral this far. That he still believed he was a good man. But good men didn't lie to their brothers. So he said, I'm fine, and stood up, leaving the coffee untouched. Back at the apartment, he checked every window, every shadow. He double-locked the door. Then, as he stood in the dark hallway, he heard Mia laughing softly from the living room, watching an old movie, smiling like she used to when they were kids. That smile was everything, and it was bought with blood money. He looked at her, then turned away, whispering to the quiet. Just a little longer. But even as he said it, Elias knew he was already running out of time. It happened fast. Faster than Elias expected. The note had been a warning. The silence that followed was a trap. He came home from a double shift to find the door to his apartment ajar. No signs of forced entry. Every instinct in his body flared. He moved slow, quiet, his hand resting on the utility knife clipped to his belt. Inside, the lights were off. The apartment was still. Too still. Mia, he called. No answer. He stepped in. The place looked untouched. No mess, no overturned furniture. Just the chilling, perfect order of something deliberate. Then he saw it. A small object on the kitchen table. A burner phone, buzzing silently as he entered. A video was already playing. He moved closer and picked it up. The footage was grainy. Shaky. Mia. Blindfolded. Tied to a chair. Breathing, but clearly drugged. A muffled voice behind the camera said, We warned you. You take what's ours, we take what's yours. The screen cut to black. Elias's knees buckled. He caught the edge of the table and stood there, head bowed, knuckles white. They had her. The cartel, or whoever ran that operation beneath the warehouse, they hadn't gone to the cops. They'd gone straight for leverage. They wanted the stash back. All of it. And they weren't bluffing. A text came in on the burner phone. 24 hours. You return everything. No cops. Or she dies. No signature. No location. Just pressure. The kind you can't reason with. Elias didn't think. He moved. He tore open the hidden crate he'd stashed in his closet. Still packed. He grabbed it, shoved it into his trunk, then loaded what he could from the warehouse in 2 frantic trips through back streets and alleyways. Every second ticked louder than the last. He tried calling Cal. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. Panic simmered behind his ribs. He knew going to the police would doom Mia. There would be no negotiation. The second a badge got involved, she'd be a message, not a hostage. He only had one option. That night, Elias broke into the warehouse for the last time. This time, he didn't just take. He planned to end it. He wired accelerants through the underground room. Soaked the boxes in solvent. Left just enough of the stolen goods visible to make the message clear. This ends now. As he stood at the edge of the loading dock, he lit the flare. The flames caught with frightening speed, crawling hungrily across the crates, devouring millions in stolen merchandise in seconds. The smoke turned thick, black, oily. He watched the fire roar up the walls, filling the underground with heat and judgment. It was revenge. It was protection. It was rage. It was the wrong thing. But it was the only thing he had left. Just before dawn, his phone rang. Another burner number. Static. Then a voice. Check the river lot. She's alive. For now. No thanks. No apology. Just transactional mercy. Elias drove like a man possessed. He found Mia in the back seat of a running car near the docks, wrapped in a blanket, her lips pale, her breathing weak but steady. No sign of her captors. Just a ghost of diesel in the air. He didn't ask questions. Just gathered her in his arms and wept into her shoulder, his breath shaking with fury and guilt and relief. He'd gotten her back. But everything else, his reputation, his future, his soul, was already burning. Elias had seen what real fire looked like, how it danced, devoured, how it whispered through walls and kissed everything with ruin. But this time, the fire wasn't something he was fighting. It was something he'd lit himself. And now it was closing in. The morning after Mia's rescue, news of the warehouse blaze hit every major network. A 5-alarm inferno in an abandoned industrial zone. The second in under a month. Investigators were already on scene by sunrise. Drones circled overhead. Fire marshals combed through the rubble. And Elias knew, this wasn't just a fire anymore. This was a manhunt in waiting. At the apartment, Mia was asleep in her bed, her vitals stable, color finally returning to her cheeks. Elias sat beside her, holding her hand gently. She didn't know what he'd done. Not the money, not the fire, not the men who'd taken her. She remembered almost nothing. He didn't want her to. She had suffered enough. He kissed her forehead and stood. Then he suited up. Back at the firehouse, the air was tight. Conversations died when Elias walked in. No one said anything, but the tension was thick enough to taste. Captain Harding called a surprise meeting that afternoon. 2 fires in the same block, both with suspicious origins. One confirmed to have destroyed what looks like a smuggling operation. He looked around the table, then let his eyes settle, heavily on Elias. And one of our own was on the scene both times. Elias didn't flinch. But inside, something twisted. Internal Affairs is asking questions, Harding added. They'll be conducting interviews this week. So if anyone's got something to say it now. Before they say it for you. The silence that followed wasn't just uncomfortable. It was surgical. After the meeting, Darren cornered Elias by the lockers. He didn't speak right away. He just stared at him with something between pain and betrayal. You were there again, weren't you? Darren said finally. Last night. Elias hesitated. What are you talking about? Darren's voice dropped. I talked to the marshal. He said they found melted steel casing in the lower structure. Someone intentionally fueled the fire. That's arson, Elias. On federal property. That's prison. Elias looked away. You don't understand. Then make me. Darren's voice cracked. We've pulled people out of fires together. You're like a brother to me. But this, whatever this is, it's eating you alive. And it's gonna burn everyone who stands too close. Elias turned, jaw clenched. They took Mia. Darren froze. They took her, Elias repeated, voice raw. They kidnapped her because I stole from them. From the stash in that warehouse. I sold it to pay for her treatment. I thought I could handle it. But they came for her. So I burned it. All of it. So they'd stop. So she'd be safe. Darren said nothing. The silence stretched long. Then quietly, Jesus, Eli. I'm not asking you to cover for me, Elias said. I just need to make sure she's okay. That she gets the care she needs. After that, he exhaled hard. I'll face whatever comes. Darren's voice was a whisper. You really think you walk out of this alive? I'm not planning to walk out at all. That night, Elias packed a duffel bag. He left a note for Mia, just a few words. I did what I had to. Live a good life. That's all I ever wanted. Then he drove to the precinct. He didn't wear his uniform. He didn't bring a lawyer. He just walked up to the desk sergeant, shoulders squared, and said, My name is Elias Crow. I'm a firefighter with Station 37. I need to report a series of crimes, starting with grand theft and arson. The officer stared. You're joking, right? Elias didn't blink. No, sir. I'm ready to give a full statement. But first, can someone make sure my sister's safe? For the first time in weeks, he felt something settle inside. Not peace, but the end of a firestorm. They kept Elias in a holding cell overnight. No cuffs, no interrogation, just silence and fluorescent lights humming like flies in a jar. He sat on the metal bench, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. No one had come to yell. No one had come to threaten. That would come later. For now, there was only waiting, and the burning knowledge that everything was about to come undone. By morning, Internal Affairs had arrived. 2 agents, suits instead of uniforms. Not angry, not surprised. Just methodical. They laid out the pieces of the puzzle one by one, watching Elias like men watching a fuse burn toward the end. You claim you acted alone, one of them said, flipping through notes. You want us to believe you found a cache of stolen goods during a warehouse fire and decided, on your own, to keep it hidden and sell it off? I didn't keep it, Elias said, voice steady. I destroyed it. Eventually. The second agent looked up. But only after profiting from it. Repeatedly. Illegally. And without reporting it. I wasn't protecting myself, Elias said. I was protecting someone I love. Silence. The first agent leaned in. Mr. Crow, you're a firefighter. A public servant. You swore an oath. You knew exactly what lines you were crossing. Are you saying you'd do it again? Elias didn't hesitate. I'd do it again. And I'd do worse if I had to. They blinked at him. Just once. Then resumed their notes. By midday, the story had leaked. Firefighter turned vigilante confesses to arson theft. Hero or criminal? The Elias Crow case. The fireman who burned a fortune. The headlines came fast. People divided faster. Talk shows, online forums, news feeds. Some painted him as a fallen hero, a man broken by a system that failed him and his family. Others saw a criminal hiding behind sympathy, using his badge to shield a selfish crime. They didn't know what it felt like to hold your dying sister's hand while bureaucracy told you her life wasn't approved for coverage. They didn't know what it felt like to light a fire not to destroy, but to protect. They offered him a deal. Reduced sentence. Plea bargain. He had to give names. Anyone who helped move the stolen goods, anyone in the criminal network. If he could give them that, he'd see daylight before he turned 50. But Elias refused. He wouldn't drag Kelbecker down. He wouldn't name the men who took Mia, who, in their own twisted way, had let her go. He wouldn't open the floodgates that could put Mia in danger again. He chose silence. Suit yourself, the prosecutor said, closing the file. But a judge won't go easy on you just because your heart was in the right place. Elias looked her in the eye. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for final. When he stood before the court, Elias wore his uniform. Pressed. Clean. No medals. No flair. Just the symbol of what he used to be, and what he'd betrayed. He read his statement aloud. Clear. Calm. I did what I did knowing it was wrong. I broke laws. I manipulated systems. I burned evidence. I deceived people who trusted me. I did these things because I was desperate, and because the world left no room for doing the right thing the right way. That doesn't excuse me. It just explains me. He paused. My sister is alive because of my actions. That's not a justification. That's a consequence. The courtroom was silent. Some eyes wet. Some narrowed. When the judge gave the sentence, 10 years with possibility of parole after 6, Elias didn't flinch. He only looked toward the gallery. Mia sat there, hands clasped in her lap. Healthier. Stronger. Tears streaked her face, but she smiled through them. She mouthed something across the courtroom. I love you. And for the first time in weeks, Elias allowed himself to smile back. Not proud, but unafraid. Prison was quieter than Elias expected. Not the silence of peace, more the hush of pressure, like the still air before a storm. He adjusted quickly. Woke early. Ate little. Spoke less. He didn't carry himself like a man afraid of violence or seeking to prove anything. He carried himself like a man who had already burned. Word of his story followed him inside. Inmates whispered about the firefighter who lit his own crime scene ablaze. Some mocked. Some respected. A few even feared him, not because he was dangerous, but because they could see something in his eyes that scared them. A man who had nothing left to lose. But Elias didn't waste time on hierarchy or grudges. He kept to himself, until one night in the prison rec hall, he noticed a kid barely out of his teens, dragging a mop across the linoleum floor with rage, not boredom. The kid had fire in his eyes. The wrong kind. Elias saw himself in that look. What he could have become, if the fire inside had never found purpose. Ever held a hose line? Elias asked the kid. The kid blinked. What? A nozzle, Elias clarified. Heavy thing. Sprays like hell. You learn to brace yourself, or it knocks you flat. The kid shook his head, confused. Why would I need to know that in here? Elias just smiled. You won't be in here forever. Might as well learn something that helps you on the outside. That was the beginning. Within months, Elias had convinced the warden to let him start a program. Basic firefighter training for inmates nearing release. Safety procedures. Hose handling. Search and rescue theory. Even CPR. The warden approved it quietly. Elias didn't want credit. He only wanted to give men like that kid a way out that didn't end in handcuffs or blood. It wasn't redemption. Nothing would erase what he'd done. But it was service. Something honest. Mia wrote every week. Her handwriting had grown steadier, her updates full of life, college courses, advocacy work, recovery milestones. She was becoming a voice for patients like herself, lobbying to change the very system that once sentenced her to die. In her 4th letter, she wrote, You gave me more than time. You gave me the chance to make something of it. I don't care what the world says about you, Eli. You didn't destroy your life. You traded it for mine. And I'll carry that weight with pride. Elias kept the letter folded in his pocket. Read it every morning. Let it burn quietly against his heart like a small, stubborn flame. Years passed. Some inmates left the program, got jobs. A few reoffended. A few didn't. The world moved on. But Elias remained. In the system. Behind walls. Not because he had to, but because he chose to serve his full sentence. He never applied for early parole. When asked why, he always gave the same answer. You don't run from a fire until it's out. And someday, when it was, he'd walk out of that prison not as a man undone, but as one rebuilt by the ashes he'd once created. Because sometimes, doing the wrong thing for the right reason doesn't make you a hero. It makes you human. And fire, real fire, only leaves behind what matters most. The ember that survives.